you to Interabang Books and it won't log you off of Zoom. So if you're worried about that, I'll post that link later as well. Well, okay, David, it's 7:05. Do you want to get started reading, and I can quietly admit any latecomers?
Yes, sir. Let me bring up my Kindle.
This is the finale section. This is exciting. The finale.
The finale.
Yeah.
How many weeks have we done of me? 8?
Well, yeah, this is the 4th meeting. So I want to just, I guess before you read that, I want to thank everybody for participating in this so far. It's been a lot of fun. It's been something that I've looked forward to every other week. And I've really enjoyed reading your novel, David, and it's been fun to get to know Gemini Inc. through all of this. I'm Blake with Writing Workshops Dallas, and it's been really fun to get to hang out with Gemini Inc. and Alexandra. So it's just been a lot of fun. So Alexandra, do you have anything to say or add before we get started?
No, I'm just really excited about hearing the end of this amazing story with the amazing title, Tell Me How This Ends Well. And this has been super fun. I love the literary community being created here, and Blake has been great to work with. This is what we're all about, having people just really enjoy storytelling and bring their stories to life.
The what?
Encounter great authors and moments of literature. So David, you're an example of that.
Yeah.
And thank you, UTSA Libraries and Twitch Bookstore in Interabang.
Yeah.
Yes, and I forgot to mention at the end of the at the end tonight, we'll announce our winners for our giveaways. So stick around for that. We'll be giving away seminars to Writing Workshops Dallas or Gemini Inc., along with a 25-page consultation on your manuscript from our author, David Samuel Levinson, who I will now turn it over to. So you can get us started with your reading. Tell us what section you're reading from, David, that I've selected.
It's from the Roz section, and it's where she and Julian are arguing about a cruise. And Roz says, "Yes, Julian, I figured," she said patiently. "It would have been a good plan except for one small detail." "Oh yeah, what's that?" he asked belligerently. "You're not coming with me," she said, drawing the oxygen tank up and over her head. And with all of her heart and with all of the might still left in her, she brought it down on him, listening to the crack of his skull and his nose, which smashed against the side of the pool. She was about to raise it above her head again, but paused. She'd been Mrs. Julian Jacobson for so long, she was unsure of how to be anyone else, especially around her children. She'd scold her for referring to herself like this, and not simply as Rosalind Jacobson or just plain Roz. She gazed upon him with her tender smile and all the love she could still muster, because that's who she was, Mrs. Julian Jacobson for 44 years. She looked down searchingly, expecting Julian to lift his head and scream at her. She didn't think she'd be able to bear another single word from this man who'd kept her in relative comfort this past year, ever since her life-changing diagnosis, yet who'd also stopped her from living what little life she had left. He'd been waiting for her to take her last breath. In the beginning, Julian's brand of love had been his own, neither demonstrative nor tender, but she thought as time went on, as they grew closer and she gave him children, that this might change. It hadn't. In fact, she never could have imagined what it would eventually become, perverting even that first year, the best year they had in her recollection, and all but erasing the sweet intimacy that had come before. Well, now it was way too late, she thought, raising the tank above her head at last and bringing it down on Julian again until his fingers slackened and he finally let go, sinking beneath the surface, the water blooming with his blood. Alrighty.
Thanks, David. I really love that section, and I'm wondering how rereading that or even listening to it has made you feel. You know, since it's probably been a while since you've read that section.
Yes, it's been quite a while. I actually listened to it. I know the narrator, the guy who narrated the audiobook, and so sometimes I like to hear his voice, and I decided I'd play the Roz section and the last Jacob section, and I had to pull off the side of the road because I was crying so much, because it was just, it, you know, it kind of, it was like coming to something that I had forgotten I'd written.
Mhm.
And it really was very moving to me. Like I try to write movingly, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And this was just, for me, even quite a relief
Mhm.
after dealing with all the stuff that the kids had to deal with. And just turning it over to Roz, who in some way is even more active than her kids, you know, even though she has this life-threatening illness. I don't know, it all just seemed to work. I don't know, it really touched me, and I was like, oh, I can write well. Fuck everyone. Fuck the naysayers. Fuck the detractors. Like, here's to me.
Now press. Wow.
I love how it's the oxygen tank, David.
Yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? The tool of death is the oxygen tank. That's a good murder scene. I mean, we see a lot of murder scenes these days on TV and film, let alone real life, which is a whole other topic. But it was an interesting, you know, it felt like I'd never read anything like that before. You know what I mean? So and then that's her oxygen tank. So it's her source of life, but it's also why does she need an oxygen tank, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it was a great prop, you know.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I I have a favorite show. One of my favorite shows is called Damages. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I like to watch that show. I love Glenn Close, and I love like the interaction between the characters. But I've been watching it again, and I find that it's very clunky as far as like, you can see, like, I mean, it's a show, it's not a book, clearly, but what I liked about the oxygen tank especially is that it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not a knife. You're right. It's not a knife. It's not a gun. You know, it's a part. It was so much a part of the book, you know, and for her to use it that way seemed very natural to me. You know what I mean? It was never anything else. It was always the oxygen tank. There was never another mode of death. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're right, Alexandra. I haven't seen anything like that either. Call my agent. I don't have one, but if I did, you could call him. Yeah.
Well, we have we got a lot of great questions that came in, and I do love that you fired your agent during the course of the Big Texas Read as we've been reading your book. That's awesome.
Did I thank him so lovingly in the last moments of the acknowledgments page? And now wish that I could strike that line out completely because he's actually a big fucking turd. Yes.
Hey, Sarah's left a comment here in the chat, and I just want to let everybody know that if you have a comment while we're going here, just use the raise your hand feature. We'll call on you so you can ask your question live. But Alexandra, what do you think? We'll work through some of these questions.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's a lot, like you said, Blake.
So
for it.
You want me to dive into the first one, Blake, and then I'll let you. So Carol sent in a great question. Do we want to unmute Carol and just have her ask it? Is Carol here?
There she is.
Okay, great.
She's right next to you.
Okay. Yeah, my question was, when Roz, she didn't take the guilt of killing Julian. You know, she was looking at her three children and saying, which one of you did this? And I guess I didn't want her to cover up something. I know this is dark humor. I just wondered if that would have changed the story if she had admitted that she had done it.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I was listening to it, and maybe Alexandra or Blake, you can jump in here, but I could have sworn, and I think this was a big mistake, and no one caught it, and I might have misheard it, but I feel like maybe it's written differently. Like when you're reading it, it looks different, but I could have sworn, and maybe it was one of her thoughts, but I could have sworn that she actually does say that she did it. Is that not right? Isn't that weird that I would actually ask that about my own book?
I remember it being left out.
Okay, it is left out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I could have
No, and
sworn.
it's an interesting thing that it's left out. So yeah, Carol, it's a great question.
Well, to put it in, how would it have changed? Well, yeah, no, it would have changed everything. It would have been, I mean, once that cat's out of the bag, yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of stumped. I'm not sure how the book would have read after that. I mean, she does it to save the kids from disgrace and from going to jail, basically. She takes it into her own hands. I mean, if she would have told them, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how, Carol, what do you think? How would the book have been different?
Well, I guess I was just looking at Roz, that she had been so weakened. And I guess I was relating to my mother, not that my mother was ill or anything, but I think she would have been so honest, you know, telling me something that she had done. But yet, and I know that she knew that all three of her children really disliked Julian so much. But I guess I was surprised that she approached them saying, which one of you did it? You know, I don't know. I know that's a minor point, but it seems like I was not wanting her to cover that up. You know,
I'm sure I had a reason for covering it up. I'm just blanking on the reason.
And that's okay.
There was a method to the madness. I just can't seem to figure out why I covered it up.
Okay.
I don't know. Quite frankly, yeah. I really don't know. Maybe it was in some way. I think probably in my mind at the time, I was thinking that she loves those kids, but she doesn't trust them. Like she tells Mo, you can't have your own talk show because you're a blabbermouth and someone will find out. So I think I think there's a line even that she's like, I love them, but they're not murderers. I love them, but they're bumbling idiots.
Right.
So I think in keeping the secret, I think it was a way to keep her kids in line. So if they blamed one another, they wouldn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if she had said, oh, no, I did it, then it would have sort of, I think it would have, I mean, honestly, I think, quite frankly, it would have deflated the tension in the entire novel. I think if she was like, you know, I did it, then there would have been, they would have had to reckon with that. And I really didn't want those kids to have to reckon. I wanted the kids to have I wanted them to have this image of their mother that was sort of pristine. And you know what? I'm not even sure that they don't believe that she didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm not really even, I think that I kept that out, but I'm pretty sure that there might have been a look that crossed between them that was like, you know, clearly mom did this. So I don't know.
Okay.
But thank you. That was a great question.
Do you think, just to chime in for a second, that she was trying to give them a sense of agency? Like they pulled it off?
Oh, yeah, that could have been too.
Spending so long plotting this, there's lovely humor here. And then she's like, I love how her voice comes to life in that last section. She's like, they're never gonna do this. And then she's like, this is my disaster. I have to do this. But do you think she was trying to like give them still a sense of agency or something?
Well, I think she was trying to protect them to the end, and
Mhm.
they ruined her plan. I
Right,
mean,
right.
that's the thing about fiction also. Like, what I found so interesting is how easily you know, when you're writing, anyway, I had to mess up that plan of hers. Like, if the plan had gone, there wouldn't have been more of the book if the
Mhm.
plan hadn't been fucked up by these kids. So you basically have to, like, I mean, yes, she was completely and utterly taken aback when they moved his body to the back of the car, but in some way she should have kind of known. And I think the reader is sort of with the kid, like, sort of with, I mean, I'm curious to hear, like, are you with the kids at that point, or are you with Roz?
Mhm.
I would assume you're with Roz. That's the way I wrote it. But there might be some who are like, there might be readers who are like, Edith is right. We should take him back. We should go to the police. And that's another reason why she didn't tell the kids, because, you know, they get pulled over, Edith is going to blab. Edith would have turned her mother in. So I couldn't have her tell Edith. So, yeah.
Oh, great question. We have another one from John. I don't know if John wants to ask this question. I've kind of put it here in the chat so everyone can see, but it's about John. Can you unmute yourself if you want to ask your question? Or I'll ask to unmute. I seem to have lost my control.
How is that possible?
Well, I'll ask it. I'm not sure why we can't
There.
get John. Oh, there we go. There's John. Okay.
A major contextual factor in the novel is the Judaic tradition. How would a rabbi evaluate Roz's decision to murder her husband? How would our American judicial system judge her? Or really, how relevant is the question altogether?
That's a good question. I think because of the time in which it's set up, oddly sort of like a time now, with all this sort of civil unrest going on. And you know, the plot was that Dietrich would tell them that some anti-Semitic thug killed him, which probably would have gone off without a hitch, except they didn't believe him for whatever reason, because they all assumed that one of them had done it.
Mhm.
And as far as Roz goes, I don't think to this writer, it didn't matter. Her justice was murdering him, and she, you know, there's a line that she says, something about how little she missed him, but how much his death meant to her, which was an interesting line. When I came across it, I was like, huh. And I think that pretty much sums up who Roz was at that moment. So her marriage was pretty much over. Her husband was trying to kill her. I don't really see she had much of a choice. So as far as the legal system goes, yeah, she would have gotten thrown in jail, I guess. What do you think?
I think if all the facts were known, she probably, given her end of life scenario, they would have probably
Been lenient.
Yes. I mean, and he tried to kill her. I mean, and there's the question of whether he was also trying to kill all of his kids too, or affect them in a very nefarious way. Yeah, I think it was a just killing, if there ever was one.
It was pretty biblical. I mean, I kind of tried to write it sort of in this sort of spare, you know, it's California, it's the desert, the pool, like, water is at a premium. These Jews are in this desert. I mean, I kind of I kind of saw it as this sort of biblical not come to Jesus moment, but sort of, just you get what you reap what you sow. This is directly out of the Bible.
Eye for an eye.
Eye for an eye. I mean, that's the thing with the kids too. I think that the problem with today's society and culture, one of the problems is that there's a disconnect between how you treat someone and their reaction to you later on down the line. And if you kick a dog hard enough over an extended period of time, that dog is eventually going to bite you. And that's basically what the kids were. The kids were an outgrowth of the abuse that they suffered over a very long period of time. I mean, that's how I tried to portray them anyway.
Hey, David, while you were talking, we got 2 questions that came in over the chat, and I happened to see Robin sit up in her chair when you said Edith turned her mother in, and I figured she would write something in the chat. And she said, how did you arrive at that while writing her character analysis? And then maybe you can see the question from Catherine, and then we'll get to Sylvia, who has her hand up. But what are your thoughts on those 2 bits that came in on the chat while you were talking?
Turn her mother in. Yeah, I think at a certain point in Edith's character, she would have definitely turned her mother in. I mean, even in the car, when they're taking his body to do whatever they're going to do with it, she's like, we need to go back. This is inhumane. Edith has always been, whether you like her or believe in her, she is the ethicist. She is one of the moral centers of the book. And she does all these crazy things, but for me, she was always one of the most pivotal characters, especially when they're driving him through Malibu. And I think it's very clear that if Roz had said, I did it, Edith would have gotten out her phone and called the cops. I mean, that could have been very interesting, but that's not the way I wrote it. And how did I arrive at that? Just because in my mind, her character was always very on the fence about it. And she loved her father the most. And she had the hardest time saying goodbye to him. I mean, Roz even says that at the end of the novel. She's like, Edith would have the hardest time saying goodbye to him. So, but Edith's character changes throughout the book, which I kind of like, and she, softens to her mother, and that sort of answers or goes to what Catherine is talking about in her question about the mixture of brutality and tenderness in the murder scene. I don't know, Catherine, why don't you talk about it? Are you there? Did you jump out?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, no, I was struck by that, and I was just curious if that was something that you planned, because it seemed so interesting to me that it was sort of an expression of love in a way.
Yeah, it's actually something that Mary Gateskill taught me when in her workshop. It's sort of the suspension of one emotion for another. And so you have this sort of brutal act, and then you have the character think about something that's completely in contrast to that, and then you go back to the brutal act. And yeah, Mary, I know, weirdly, Mary taught me that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
She mastered at that, but I thought that was really effective in that scene.
Thanks. Yeah, I like slowing it down. I thought it was, yeah. Anyway, it was something I had Mary's voice in my head when I was writing it.
Interesting.
That scene, anyway. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Sylvia, you had your hand up if you wanted to chime in.
Yes. I was both surprised and pleased that Dietrich was complicit in Julian's death. Why does he help Roz when he wasn't pleased with what the 3 kids were trying to do earlier in the book? But he does ultimately end up helping Roz accomplish what she did.
That's a great question. I think he wishes that Roz were his mother. He has this whole thing about mothers and German mothers, and how his mother is cold and distant, and how Roz is just so warm and welcoming. And I think it just makes sense that he would capitulate. And he told her about, he ratted out Jacob. Like, his alignments are interesting for me anyway, because, you know, he's clearly in love with Jacob and wants to be a member of the family. I think it's a way for him to ingratiate himself into the family, quite frankly. I mean, there's a total love affair going on between Roz and Dietrich throughout the whole book that you don't see. It's never, I mean, it's kind of a MacGuffin, right, Lisa?
Yeah.
Is that also a MacGuffin? No? You don't know. It's fine. But all of this stuff happens off stage. You don't see Dietrich. You actually do see him talking to her. I think in Jacob's, one of the sections, maybe it's Jacob's section, where there's a moment, I remember writing this into the book, where there's a moment where Jacob is like, Dietrich and his mother are talking, but he has no idea what they're talking about. And that's when he's basically saying, like, your kids are going to kill your husband. By the way.
Okay.
You know?
Roz does say that she loves him like another son.
Oh, right. You're right. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, she does. Yeah. You know, you start out with one family, and then you end up with a completely different family by the end of the book. I mean, the whole thing just like...
I also thought that when the mom, someone already said this, that when the mom said, who did it, or which one of you did it, or something like that, and then she never said that she did it, I pictured that at some point after that day, that the three kids either got on the phone, or maybe the next time they saw each other and said, well, I know I didn't do it. Did you do it? You know, like all three of them talking like that. And that maybe then they figured out that the mom had done it.
Yeah.
Or maybe Dietrich told Jacob. Who knows?
You know what? I don't know either. So totally fine. Yeah, I think that's probably what happened. I would assume that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can't put into a book, or else it would be 1,000 pages. So.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you.
There's some great, should we pick like a few, like Phil, you have some great questions here. Should we, do you want to like,
yeah,
like
Phil
what-
submitted
what
3
question?
really good questions.
Yeah.
So like, what do you think, Phil? You want to go grab bag? Do you remember some of the questions? I can paste them in there.
Well,
Really great.
I remember the essence of them. The first is, on the very first meeting, you said that you thought Edith changed the most of any character in the book, and it seems to me that it's quite clear that Roz does. That Roz comes on as a totally passive character and becomes the only truly active character in the whole book. Would you like to comment on that?
No, I want you to comment on that.
Well, I just did, but
I know, but I want to hear more of that. It's interesting.
well, I mean, what does anybody else do other than kvetch and do a little bit of oh well, we could do this, we could do that.
No, you're right.
When it comes time to actually do something, Roz is active, but up until that point, she's in a wheelchair. She relies on oxygen.
Yeah.
She's been weak to all appearances.
To all appearances, that's exactly right. I'm gonna say.
But when it comes to it, she's the active character in the book.
She is. And you know what? So is Julian. Roz and Julian are the yin yang to this entire novel. Julian is described as a black hole, and Roz, I don't know how she's described, but if I had to describe her, I would say she's a ball of fire. And she's a slow, I mean, the thing again is, because her section comes so late, And I had to do that, clearly, because if Dietrich, when you find out, I mean, I was hoping that when a reader read Roz's section, that the reader would start filling in all of these holes that are missing in the narrative. And one of the holes is, how does Roz find out about this? And the hole, and Dietrich is the hole. So once you figure out that Dietrich told her early Thursday, you know that she's been much more active and she's been plotting this all along. That's what I love about Roz. She's been scheming the entire time. You know, she's the one who added water to the pool.
Right. No, that's a great detail.
I mean, and she lets everyone else take the blame for it because she can't tell anybody. Who does she tell though? She tells one person. Your favorite character, Alexandra.
The daughter-in-law.
Yes,
Oh yeah,
Pandora.
Pandora, that's right. When they're in the car talking that night. You're right.
She tells Pandora just in case if something goes wrong. So I loved like bringing Pandora back into it. It's all the women, basically. The women are the most active in this book, quite frankly. You're right, Phil. Totally right.
And I mean-
You want to do another one of my questions?
Yeah, that would be
The
great.
water to the pool is the MacGuffin. I have a hard
Okay,
time
well-
figuring out what a MacGuffin is.
The very first meeting right after it, I sent an email through Blake to you indicating that I thought this was in the tradition of the great revenge tragedies of the Renaissance, like Hamlet. And I think I was absolutely wrong about this, that there was another thing happening at that time called the domestic tragedy. And the big difference is that the person you're doing revenge against is not an important person. He's not a major character, not a king but he's less important. And in the main example I know, Arden of Feversham, the conspirators are bumblers. They're absolute bumblers, and that seems to be the case here as well. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yes, that definitely seems reasonable to me. He is a petty tyrant. I think that's true. I knew nothing about this, quite frankly. I'll have to read Arden of Faversham. It sounds great.
It is. It's what I'm sure that it was a tragedy to the people who watched it in the first place, but it has been remade. There've been a couple of modern productions of it, and they always see it the way I see it, which is as a black comedy.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay. The other question, sort of in that same literary thing, is in the history of revenge tragedies. Revenge is seen, of course, as all important, but it is still seen as transgressive, and the perpetrators, even if the revenge is richly deserved, the perpetrators are killed in the end. Think again of Hamlet. In this case, it isn't exactly that they all live happily ever after, but Roz, in fact, does live happily for the rest of her natural life. So you've turned around the way that the revenger is seen in this. Would you like to comment on that?
Jacob's reverie of this new play, however, turns very dark. Are we to take Jacob as a prophet?
Okay, that's my last one. But
oh, sorry. Can you ask me that one again?
Okay, basically, you don't treat revenge as being a transgressive act the way it's always been covered in literature, because always the revenger suffers his own dire end. In this case, Roz lives out the rest of her life happily.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I don't think Roz was. She wasn't getting revenge. She was stopping.
Well,
she was stopping a murder plot.
She did. She talks about. Okay, well, I mean, to me, it seemed like in part revenge was revenge for the way Julian had been all those years.
I mean, of course.
There was also the thing of trying to prevent her children from making an absolute mess of the thing and getting so there she's multi-dimensional. There are multiple things to her
To the act.
motivation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sure. But is it revenge? I mean, I think of the Count of Monte Cristo when I think of revenge. Maybe Lady Macbeth. Would she be considered revengeful? Yeah. I mean, maybe
No, not so much, but Hamlet is definitely revengeful.
Hamlet is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very vindictive. It's interesting. I mean, I've often thought about the Shakespearean tragedies when I was writing this, and the Greek tragedies especially.
Right.
One of my favorites, of course, would be clearly Oedipus Rex.
Well, but Oedipus isn't so much a revenge thing, but Medusa is.
I haven't read Medusa.
I mean, you've got this whole cycle within the plays that are built on the curse of the house of Atreus. You know, it's a major thing for them, and always the fact is that the revenger is considered to be, even though he's justified, his act is transgressive, and he pays a heavy price for it. But
Yeah,
Rose does not.
But she does, though. I mean, I think her illness is I mean, I think that she has
Her
one
illness is
moment.
pre-existing. She lives longer than she's.
Well, no,
originally
yeah. No, I think I clearly wrote it that way. There's the golden age of the Jacobson family after Julian dies, and I had to write it that way. It had to. He was the evil spirit that inhabited the house, and once you exorcise the evil spirit, you assume that you're going to live a much better life. The poltergeist is gone, and Roz even, yeah, you're right. She lives a year and a half longer. The kids, the grandkids, form the Jacobson 5, but there's always the beating heart of hate that runs through this book, and that ends up destroying everything.
Well, that was my last question, which was, as far as the action in the book goes, the Jacobs family is not in that much trouble at the end. Now, Jacob goes out to his car, and he sits there and he has a reverie in which he basically plots his next play. And then that thing turned really, really dark. But is he just being neurotic, or is he a prophet?
I don't know. I have no idea. I hope that he's just neurotic, but chances are he probably is prophetic in some way. I don't know. I had a different ending to this novel, so it was much darker. So if you can even imagine. So the fact that there is a play that kind of distances the reader from what I had actually written. I mean, I think my editor was right. It ended on a very, very dark note. I mean, what's interesting is, okay, Laura, I will. What's interesting is you can read that last line in two different ways. I meant it to be very ambiguous. And Alexander's nodding. How would you read it differently, Alexander?
Oh, your closing line?
Yeah, the closing line. Why don't you read it aloud?
Sure. I mean, I'm reading that last section going, okay, things are going far too well. Something has to happen, right? And I love the last line.
I can read it if you can't find it.
Yeah, right. I got it right here. Do you want to read it, David, or do you want me to read it?
No, go ahead. You can read it.
It's actually a long. One thing I was going to comment on is the final paragraph of the book. I think it's one whole sentence.
Yeah.
and I was very impressed by that. So I'm
Thank
going to go for it and read the whole.
Okay.
After taking a hit off the joint and passing it to Edith, who took a hit as well, he thought about his fictional Jacobsons, after having lived for dozens of years in peace and harmony in Germany, would all wake up one morning, older and grayer and virtually unrecognizable, with wrinkles and cataracts and hearing aids, the life of a Jacobson in old age, and leave their homes to meet for breakfast, just as they had been doing for years. Except that on that day, one that none of them would ever forget, and that would prove the indomitable supremacy of history yet again, they would all pass newsstands, each a different one, for they all lived in different corners of Berlin, and they would pause to read the headlines, which were the same on every paper and said the same thing, in German and in English, that the Bundesrat, I hope I'm not butchering that, that the Bundesrat had ratified and updated the approved list of protected species and had, by a count of 56 to 13, struck the word Jew from it completely.
Yeah, that's an interesting last line. And so what do you make of that, Alexandra?
History's repeating itself. I mean, what?
Or not.
Right, or not. Right.
Just because the word was struck from it does not mean that anything is going to happen.
Right. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, I really left it up to the reader to figure out if what would come next, basically.
Right.
I mean,
And
clearly,
don't forget this is just Jacob's Reverie. This isn't what happens.
no, it's just Jacob's Reverie.
Right, it's his play, yeah.
But it's an extension of the reality that's going on around them. And writers generally take from what's going on around them and put, like, a lot of writers have been very prophetic over the years. And so I think Jacob's play is another sort of form of that propheticism, or it's just a play, you know?
No, but you're right. It's an uneasy last line. But
it's an easy last line, but it's the last line of a play. It's not even the last line.
No.
It's the last line of a fiction within a fiction. So, I mean, it's interesting that even I, as the writer, am now just sort of figuring out that it's actually the last line of a play. The novel ends with the last line of a play that hasn't even been written. That's interesting. Well done, me.
I mean, there's overall hope. I'll just comment on this quickly because he's writing, right? That's a great, you're happy for Jacob because he's like, that's the one thing that's going to get him through this, writing this next play. So there is, because a lot of the book has mentioned him frustrated with his writing. So there is some, I did take some hope with that, despite the uneasiness of the final line, because he's writing, you know what I mean? So just from a reader's perspective, I'm happy for Jacob because he's writing.
I want to ask this of everybody, who has the most emotional sort of role in the entire book? And where does it finally come out? There's a passage at the end that to me sort of represents something. It's not a trick question. Maybe it's too hard a question to, but there's a character in the novel who expresses something kind of amazing toward the end. It's my favorite part of the entire book. Not that you would know that.
I mean, I love the passage on 399. I don't know if this is what you're referring to about what Deet says to him,
Yeah, that's it.
the death of his mother. I just
Yeah.
thought that was really beautiful. Yeah.
I always thought it was interesting that it would come from the German, who, you know, stereotypically is not someone who emotes. I have German friends who are like, you know us, we do not emote. You know, they're you know, they can be very robotic. And I just thought it was interesting how all of these roles sort of get reversed as you sort of move through the book. Roz becomes the perpetrator, but also the mother bear. Like all of, you know, Dietrich, whose history is bloody and horrible, but also comes from some of the most amazing literature that's ever been written on the planet, you know, has this moment where he's like, didn't anyone ever tell you? How could you not know? I always love that little moment between them. For me, it sort of solidifies the entire novel for me right there.
This is on 399, that like the second to last paragraph. It's all about grief, right? Just
Yeah, do you want to read it?
Sure, what the heck? It's a beautifully written. And forgive me if my German's a bit, I don't speak, Mein Schatz, is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so this is Dietrich speaking to Jacob. Oh, mein Schatz, didn't anyone ever tell you, Diet asked. This is the pain that will inform all other pains from now on. You have lost your mother. That is the primal pain, what we call it in German. There will never be another pain like this pain. You cannot ready yourself for it because it is unimaginable. But I am here, and you are here, and your brother and your sister and Roz, she's here too. She's everywhere. You are meant to be sad, and you will be sad for a long, long time, and I cannot say this will ever stop being sad. But when it gets bad, I mean really bad, all you have to do is remember the last few months of her life and how extraordinary you and your siblings made them. You gave her an afterlife before she went away. Jacob, be happy for this, mein Schatz. Let this be soothing to you. I promised your mother we would live a beautiful life, and we are. We will.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sentimental. It's the most sappy, sentimental thing, and it's coming out of a German's mouth. That's, I mean, I just always, I don't know, it always touched me that he would say that.
I mean, we have some questions in the chat, Blake. Should we, because I think they follow up kind of about, obviously, this end section.
Yeah.
Victoria's my sister. Yay, Victoria. Vicky, do you want to read your question? It's a great one.
What I said when I asked if he could tell us what ending he originally.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So the original ending. The original ending was that there was no Jacob section at the end. It kept going. Roz's section kept going. And it kept going. And it kept going. And it became much more speculative in nature. It zoomed ahead 50 years. And so the play was actually reality. And the very last, it was always, like, that paragraph was always the last line. But so Jacob moves to Germany. He flies back, but in flying back, he misses, like, the planes get all mixed up, and he has to take a later flight. And by that time, they were going to scatter Roz's ashes together, but the siblings don't meet again. Mm-hmm. And Edith, it's up to Edith to scatter the ashes, and she does it with Elias, and they go to Point Doom. And they're scattering the ashes, and they're attacked by anti-Semites and killed and thrown off the cliff.
Jeez.
That's
And it ends again with Jacob. It ends with it. The play is actually real in the version I wrote. So they're all old. Edith is dead. They're all living in Germany, and they all pick up the paper and they're like, "Fuck!" And there's the last line. So I kind of like that, but my editor was like, "It's too dark. It's too dark. Don't kill Edith. We all love Edith." So
Well, plus it seems a little pat to bring up the excuse they used about Julian's death to try to make it real, because that was what they claimed was the anti-Semites killed him.
Oh, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that was the original ending.
Very dramatic.
Very dramatic. I still kind of liked it better than the ending that is there, but I was overruled. I wrote my editor a very long letter, and she was like, "Nope, I bought this book. I own it. You're going to write what I want you to write." I'm glad she did. I think Jacob's final section is, I don't know, it gives some kind of hope and redemption, and I guess that's what she was wanting. I feel like it Hollywoodized the ending, and I kind of want to vomit whenever I think about it, but it's fine. Whatever.
Thank you.
Yes, there is a real point doom. No, thank you, Carol. There is a real point doom. Yes, one of my students, when I was teaching in Atlanta, one of my students is from Malibu, and she was like, I was like, "Do you know anything about the California coast?" And I was like, "I want to set something." And she was like, "You should set it at Point Doom." And I was like, "There's really a place called Point Doom." And she brought in a map like the next time we met, and she was like, "Here it is." And I looked it up, of course, but yeah, there's a Point Doom. I couldn't pass it up. Yes. Tell them a part about where the family dismembers. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, there was also another part. Thanks, Connor. Where when they go to,
Can you say that to everybody who didn't? Is that in the chat? What's the question, David?
Oh, the question is, there's another part that I took out because of Sheila, actually. A friend of mine who knows Alexandra, she's a wonderful poet named Sheila Black. She read this novel in 2015, I guess, and before it came out, before I even tried to find an agent. And she got to a place in the novel and she was like, "This is overkill, haha." And so I took it out, but I kind of miss it. And it's, so they, after they lay Julian's body out and like wash him and dry him and say a prayer or two, they end up dismembering him. And like one kid takes one body part basically and like rips it off, or they have a saw, I guess, in the back of the car or something.
Brutal.
And Roz cuts off his head, like with help. And she, don't think badly of me. I mean, it's funny. This was all supposed to be sort of like, very, very dark humor. So she's standing there and she kicks his head into the ocean and she says, "So long, cunt."
Oh my God, that's intense. Oh my God.
I kind of missed that. I missed that scene. But
Sheila, actually, up until the very last thing that you said, it was beginning to sound like Stranger in a Strange Land to me.
Stranger, and I know that title.
Robert Heinlein.
Who?
Robert Heinlein.
Oh, yeah.
Science fiction writer.
Right, of course, yes. Duh. Until Roz says goodbye, cunt. Goodbye, you cunt.
If you think of movies, it kind of parts of that last section reminded me of Little Miss Sunshine, because the grandfather dies and his body's in the back of the car. It's caught between Little Miss Sunshine and Fargo. When you start talking about disfiguring people, I think of Fargo.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm just adding that because and I love Little Miss Sunshine, but it is gruesome, that scene with Julian in the back, but for some reason I like how it comes off, David. He's very there, but then it also doesn't feel, I'm not grossed out about it. It's just like this kind of wild scene when they're driving him to Point Doom, you know? But Little Miss Sunshine did come to mind. It was kind of fun.
I mean, there's a lot of driving in this book.
Yeah.
Like tons of driving.
By the way, another nice touch was Edith winding up with bits of Roz's ashes on her shoes.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's true.
Yeah, very, very Lebowski-esque.
It is. You're right.
Really? The Big Lebowski?
Yeah, the Big Lebowski, the whole scene with the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up in their mouth, I think. Yeah. Ashes are not easily controllable, obviously.
No.
You know, Connor has a question. He says, now that you mention it, does the driving have any specific significance, or is it just a regular plot device, or does that have everything to do with Southern California?
I think I think car culture is fascinating. And everyone is so into their cars. If you don't live, even in New York, I guess, or in places where you can take public transport. I don't know. I don't think it was a plot device, but I definitely they had to be somewhere where they could drive. There's a lot of shit that goes on in these cars. There, people plot and scheme like Roz and Pandora. Julian expresses one of his only real moments of fear in the entire book in a car. Like everything is sort of wrapped up in cars in this book, which I also kind of, clearly it was done on purpose, but cars also, I mean, they're extensions of people, right? So Moses has a big white Escalade, and what's her name has a cargo van, and the car, Dietrich can't get out of the seatbelt in the rental car. We all have these like very strange relationships with our automobiles, whether you want to believe it or not. I mean, I talk to my car sometimes. Please make it up this hill.
That's pretty funny, David.
David, while you're kind of talking about like alternate endings or backstories, Kathleen, I just kind of put her question in the chat. It's about Julian, which I figured it'd be nice to talk just a little bit more about Julian. I don't know if Kathleen wants to ask her question or if you just want to read it there, but
Kathleen's not really, her screen is brown. So, Kathleen, do you want to ask this or do you want me to? I'm not on camera. Okay, I'll ask it. Or just Alexandra, do you want to ask it? You do. Question from Kathleen. Go ahead.
So it's just, this is Kathleen's question. Julian was the black hole of the Jacobson family. Is his despicable character innate, or is there a backstory to his becoming such a reprehensible character?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Are you off camera and not talking, or are you off camera and talking?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey,
Hi.
I'm just camera side. But the idea of Julian was kind of fascinating because he's in some ways one of the most consistent characters in the book. He is consistently terrible. And it got me thinking that, what was the genesis of his sociopathy? And I was just interested, did you have a backstory for him when you were developing the character?
No. he just kind of sprang out of probably an amalgamation of a lot of people I know.
What did he represent? What did he represent for you specifically? Was he the embodiment of the bigotry that you experienced as a Jew?
Oh.
I was just curious. I mean, he was Jewish, but he seemed to be so reprehensible that I just, there seemed to be so little empathy.
Yeah, well, I try to write him with as little empathy as possible. He's sort of, I mean, there are two arguments to make for Julian, I think. One is that I could have made him less reprehensible and you would have related more to him and you would have sympathized more with him, but then I would have had to tell his backstory, or I would have had to give him his own section, and I really didn't want to do that. I actually did write a Julian section, but I wrote it when he was dead. There was another section after Roz, and it was the Julian section, and he was a ghost, and he was haunting all of them. And I kind of loved it, but the book was really long. The book was much longer. And I wasn't sure what I mean, do you really care why Hitler was Hitler? I mean, maybe we do, but at the end of the day, Hitler was Hitler. It doesn't matter what his backstory is. And that's kind of how I felt about Julian.
Yeah, I mean, and it was just that he was so awful. To me, one of the most satisfying, orgasmic portions of the book was when Roz killed him. It was sort of, there was something so satisfying about it because she was so long suffering, and her kids are planning in their bumbling way to off him, and she takes the opportunity, she kind of sees carpe diem, she seizes the day, and she kills him. And that to me was kind of the climax, one of the most satisfying aspects of the whole book.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. The whole book was a wind up to that moment. I think I was telling Blake and Alexander that. I mean, it's funny because I was on the phone with a friend while I was writing this. She lives in the city in New York, in Brooklyn, and I was telling her the plot. And I hadn't talked to her in a long time. She's a former student. She's a writer. I love her. And I was telling her the plot, and she was like, "Oh, and the mom's gonna kill them, right? Or the mom's gonna kill him." She blurted it. She butted in, and I was like, I didn't even think that the mother was gonna do it. I had a whole other scenario. I had a whole other shebang thing going on, and she said it, and I was like, of course Roz kills him. Duh. Hello, idiot. Me, meaning. Hello, dummy. Of course the mother, and it changed the whole course of my book. I didn't thank Yvette for that, and Yvette's not here, I don't think, but yeah, because I mean, I kind of thought, I was of two minds actually. I thought it was a little cliched that the mother would kill the father, so I was going for something else. But then I started looking at I started writing Roz's section, and I was like, oh, fuck it, she's clearly going to kill him. And
it was completely satisfying, and it made complete sense. And I just, it just made complete sense. It was sort of the obvious, not in a predictable way, but it was obvious to her as a character that it was something that she hadn't really planned on doing, but that she took, she was in some ways the most competent member of the family, that she took the opportunity, she seized it, and she took out the cancer. She cut out the cancer in the family.
Yeah.
And it was completely was
Then she
completely
got
obvious that the others weren't going to do it.
Did you believe that they were not going to do it?
Yes, absolutely.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, you could tell, you know, they kvetched about it a lot and they fantasized about it a lot, but I didn't think they were ever going to do it.
Okay.
And I don't think she thought they were ever going to do it.
Maybe that's a good point. I like that she used them as an excuse to get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine by me. I'll take it. That's a good read.
Yeah,
That's what
because
it seems to be.
actually, she's not very likable until then. I mean, I had mixed feelings. I was like, what's up with this mother? She's putting up with all of this. And it's great to hear her voice in that last section. I love that line where she's like, this is my disaster. You know what I mean? I own this. I have to do something about this. And
Well, he even
really,
says,
yeah.
Jacob even says, she even says she was the antidote to Julian. Like, she is, and the problem is that she needed a lot of antivenom to get rid of him. And clearly it was Dietrich who, whether they were going to do it or not. I mean, I love that idea, Phil. I didn't even think about it like that. I always thought they would do it. I think I probably had it written that they had done it. And then I talked to my friend and she was like, oh, of course the mother does it. And I was like, oh, fuck. Here we go. Rewrite. I don't think I'd gotten there yet. So I'm glad that I didn't have to write all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, she even says that she was always the antidote to Julian. And that's who she was. She didn't do a very good job of it because her kids turned out the way they turned out. But, you know, I mean, I tried to write this as, I mean, it's hard to write a character who's, I guess it's hard to write like a really complex character where you're very ambivalent about them. And that's what I was trying to do with kind of like with all of the kids. Like, you like certain things about them, but you really didn't like, and that's how life is. You like certain things about people and you don't like certain things about people. You don't like all of somebody. I mean, unless you're a saint, and none of us is a saint. So there are things about me, I'm sure that all of you have gotten to really loathe over the course of the last 8 weeks. And there are things about me that you love and you'll miss. And vice versa. So that to me was the exercise for this novel. Was I wanted the reader to sympathize with the kids, but not enough that they would become unreal. You can't write a whole entire character who's good, but I ended up writing an entire character who is pretty 95% evil. And I really loved it. Writing Julian was super fun. And writing that scene where Roz kills him was incredibly fun. Totally fun. Roz's section was super fun to write. It was like all these hurdles. I had to get through all of these hurdles, hundreds of pages of hurdles. And then I get to Roz, who walks slower. She talks slower. She doesn't have a lot of energy. But in this one moment, she comes to life and lets it all go. And it was really satisfying for me too as a writer.
Actually, Jean Hackett has a great question about another character, Bronson. Jean, do you want to ask that?
I'm fascinated with the name in this, and I'm curious what his purpose is in the novel. And is he possibly the most competent member of the family other than Roz?
I would have to say yes. That's a great question. I love Bronson. He's the most prophetic when he tells his dad take a look around you. You disappoint me, Dad. Take a look around you. This is all going to go away. Which harkens to the end of the book, basically.
Mhm.
I think Jacob and Bronson, I had a scene. I don't know if it's still in there. I don't think it is. Is it in there when they're sitting in cantors and Jacob and Bronson look at each other? Is that in I don't even remember if that was in there or not. There's a moment where I might have, I don't know, maybe I never wrote it, which is sad. But yeah, Bronson is really the prophet of the book. And the voice of the future, basically. And definitely the most sane, for sure.
Doesn't Roz have to he seems to be and I'm sorry, I'm just piping in here. I hope that's okay.
It's fine.
He seems to be deeply intuitive as a child, and like he doesn't miss anything. And Roz has to tell him. Doesn't she tell him at one point what she did? Because he keeps looking at her. Am I misremembering that? But she kind of has to tell Bronson the truth.
Yeah, no, she tells him, and he says
Yeah.
he was a bad man.
Right.
He had to go. He was a bad man.
Yeah.
Bronson knew everything. Bronson was the conscience. He was basically the consciousness of the Jacobson family.
Mm-hmm. That's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. I loved writing him. There had to be one little standout triplet, you know? Yeah. Oh, Catherine, did you go? I guess Catherine's gone.
I mean, we have a few more. Should we, Blake, ask just one or two more questions from those sent in before tonight's session?
Yeah, we have just a few more.
Yeah.
We went through, it looks like, do you want to ask Elaine's question?
Sure.
Or we've got, John has another question. Is John still
John has a question we never asked. Yeah.
Let's do John, because John's still here, right?
Yeah,
is Elaine
John, you
here?
want to ask your question, the one about Julian as a character?
Julian, it sort of goes back to what we've been discussing a little bit. This question relates to the Julian character. He is not given a major section novel outlining his point of view. He is characterized primarily through the multiple points of view of his family members. Is he given a fair hearing in the minds of his family? Specifically, if he had been diagnosed as a psychopath, should he have been murdered? Shouldn't he have been committed to a mental health facility? Well, and the antagonist always seems to get shortchanged.
He's not given a major section. No, he's not. Again, I think you learn. I was hoping that you would be satisfied with learning about him in like Roz's final section, where you would get more of an overall picture from her point of view because she knows him best.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if he's a psychopath. I mean, I kind of wrote him as one, and I mean, he's definitely the most black and white character in the book for sure. And yes, I think he definitely gets a fair hearing in the minds of his family. I think that they would have been very happy for him not to exist at all. They would have been very happy for his kids, especially would have been very happy if they had gotten divorced back when they were supposed to get divorced. And Roz even thinks about that, I think, in this section, where she's like, there was that moment where he said sorry for the first and only time, and that was enough for her. I mean, this woman has been living with crumbs, but she clearly there's something that she clearly gets out of being with him, right? And as far as the antagonist goes, I mean, I guess he's the prime antagonist, but there's also like society, which is very antagonistic, right? So I think in some way he must, in my mind, have represented that outside. And also, isn't there a moment where someone says, like, I think it's Edith who says, like, you do realize the irony here that they're killing Jews and you want to kill Dad? Like, let's take out another Jew. Yeah, I don't know. I like that you called him a psychopath. That's exactly what I wanted. I mean, did he come across to you as a psychopath, John?
I was trying to decide which word to use, whether sociopath, psychopath,
Yeah.
you know, some kind of pathological.
Yeah.
I just got through reading Confederacy of Dunces, and he reminded me somewhat of Ignatius Riley, and the trajectory of Ignatius was very stably unstable throughout the novel, and he kind of reminded me, you know, the trajectory is constant and he doesn't change. The others change, but his trajectory is evil all the way through. No doubt.
He's great. That's a great novel. Is that your first time reading it?
Yes, our book club read it, and I'd always heard about the novel, and the city is so much a part of that novel. New Orleans is just a fantastically written.
It's amazing.
Tragedy, of course, from a writer's perspective.
Yeah, he died. He killed himself.
He killed himself like 11 years before he won the Pulitzer Prize.
Wow.
Yeah. I read the Neon Bible. Have you read when he wrote?
I have not read that one.
It's fantastic. He wrote it when he was 16.
Wow.
That's right.
And it's fantastic. He was a genius, this guy.
No doubt.
John Kennedy Toole. I had a roommate in college named John Kennedy O'Toole.
Did he get constant jokes about it, or?
He never read, like, he was.
Yeah.
I loved him, but he was a dummy. So the jokes that I would have loved to have made never would have landed. No landing. So psychopathy is not a disease. The difference in, it is. You're right. You cannot, No, I mean, that's the thing. It's interesting that Edith is an ethicist, the opposite of a psychopath. Oh, that is interesting. Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting, I mean, I kind of thought of Julian as, you know, was it Zeus who jumped out, Athena who jumped out of her father's head? I kind of thought of, who jumped out of Zeus's head? I kind of thought of these kids as parts of Julian, like, I mean, I guess it's too easy to say sort of chips off the old block, but they had to contain parts of Julian and parts of Roz. And then I had to figure out, like, what parts of Julian did they contain and what parts of Roz did they contain? And
he was obviously the prime mover for the whole book, because without him, nothing would have been done, because everything was a reaction to him.
Yeah, totally. They gathered because of him. I mean, that's the thing. That's why I think I didn't include his section. Again, I didn't include his section because he was such a force of nature throughout the entire book. Interestingly, one of the first covers that I saw, which was horrendous, no offense to the designer if he's here, probably not. It was a cover of a man sleepwalking, pushing a lawnmower through a yard. And it's interesting because Julian is, I mean, he's a character, but he doesn't have his own section. But I thought it was interesting that out of all the characters this guy could have chosen, he chose Julian, and he chose this weird, really horrible design of him pushing a lawnmower. I mean, it's interesting the second version was, I liked it, but, a lot of people have had some huge problems with
that and those aggressive coyotes.
And yes, the aggressive coyotes. Yeah, that was a great scene with the helicopters.
Yeah.
So LA. Just so quintessentially LA for me. You're just like sitting there and all of a sudden you hear a freaking helicopter. Like, okay, where are we? Are we in Beirut? I kind of tried to superimpose Beirut onto LA. Any more? Are we done? What time is it?
I think we come to the end. Are
I
there any
think
more questions, Alexandra, you wanted to ask?
Oh, I just wanted to, there's more, but because your book is so rich, and I'm gonna miss reading it, David. Yeah. But I just want, I mean, I loved your acknowledgement section. It was not like any acknowledgement section I've ever read. It was kind of super ironic, and it's sort of this dear reader letter, but it's all about how you almost didn't write the whole book because you were dreading writing this acknowledgement section. And I just found it funny in a book that's called, Tell Me How This Ends Well, even in the acknowledgement section, the author's kind of worried about how to end it, even in the acknowledgement section. So I just enjoyed how you played with that. So I don't know, any comments on, were you trying to kind of do something different with the acknowledgement section, or, yeah, I just thought it was interesting.
I was definitely trying to do something different. Yeah.
Well, you did. I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was just a great voice in there. Like, to those of you who could have been here but aren't, sorry, I can't include everyone. Like, I loved the whole, like, honesty, because I'm sure it's a little bit stressful writing acknowledgement sections because you can't fit in everyone you want to thank, right? So,
No.
yeah.
I wasn't even gonna I actually didn't even want one, and they were like, you have to have one. And I was like, okay, if I have to have one, then I'm writing it like this. And they were like, okay.
I thought your last line of it was really beautiful, actually. This book is for my mother and for anyone who's ever been terrorized and bullied. You are not alone. So it was just cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never really hit on the domestic violence aspect of this book, but the whole book is basically one big domestic violence. I guess that's a lot of fiction, is one big domestic violence, right?
Sure, in different ways, yeah.
David, this is Sylvia again. I just had one quick question because before you go, I need to ask it. And this is from really during the Mo section. When they're around the table and Julian starts choking, and it's left to Mo to save his life or not. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're trying to murder this man anyway. This would be a great way to go. And you put a lot of thought into the verbiage in the book, where he finally he contemplated it and then decided he had too many witnesses or something, I guess. But I thought, oh my gosh, he just lost his chance.
Yeah.
That was a great scene. I really liked that one, by the way.
Thank you. That was fun to write too. That's, there's a rule in fiction, of course. You never let your character get what he or she wants. And, I couldn't possibly that early on let them get what they wanted. It was too easy. And also, I kind of loved that at that moment, they're all tied with these strings. Like every character is tied to every other character with these moving, stretchable strings. And, Mo's off doing this, and everyone's sort of, like everyone's watching him, but.
And the cameras too.
And the cameras are watching. Yeah. So what do you do? I mean, it was kind of a moment where I was like, what do you do? Do you hesitate? And then, of course, the repercussions later when Roz says you can't do, how can you possibly have a talk show? Someone will have seen that video and they will know that you hesitated. And then it will all come crumbling down. So there are these things that you set up in one scene that you have to answer in another scene.
Yeah.
And it has to be sort of detrimental to the character in some way. So of course, a show called Moses, Moses exclamation point. Of course, what person wouldn't want to do a show called Moses exclamation point? But yeah, I mean,
That was a great scene.
thank you. I love that scene too.
No, I love how reality TV comes into it and kind of that, whatever, the meta aspect of that. Like, you know, I don't know, like, what is reality in this book? You know, it's like we're in kind of in the future, then there's like reality TV, and then with the way the book is structured, you know, so each character is never really fully revealed to any other character, because at least from my experience, when I read each character's section, you find out so much more about them than other characters are saying in other sections. So I won't go on and on about it, but it's sort of like how to make sense of reality, you know? So I found it interesting there was a reality TV element, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved writing that whole thing, you know. And when the Mrs. Rothman comes to the door interrupting, and the kids paint blood on the lintels, thinking that it's gonna save them all from the angel of death. I mean, it's so cute, but so twisted, you know? Very perverse.
It did feel like on the page you were having a lot of fun writing that.
Oh, I did. See, so how could anyone say that was autobiographical? Never happened. It was all a dream.
So I guess, I mean, believe it or not, we're at 8:30. I mean, sad but true. Blake, should we hand out all the prizes? How do you want to do our finale announcements with David's book?
Well, you know, we had this idea. David brought this idea for a big book club like this, and I can't believe we're at the end of our first book. And you know, you never think things are going to work, and then people show up and want to discuss your book. You know, and I just have really enjoyed getting to hear everyone's questions and talk to you, David, about this book. It's been so much fun, and I'm so glad everybody tuned in for this. I did preemptively paste the results of the winners in our in the chat window there, along with a link where you can buy the Kathleen Kent's two books, The Dime and The Burn, which we're going to discuss on the 24th of June and on the 8th of July, along with our prize winners and some discount codes in case you're interested in classes at Gemini Inc. or writing workshops. But thank you, David. This has been like it's really been so much fun.
Yeah, I love it. It really is a bright spot in the dim world of the fucking pandemic. Excuse my French. I'm glad everyone showed up. I have been incredibly happy. I'm glad that we read my novel, which was great for me to talk about. I mean, it really, I don't know. Thank you guys for asking such great questions too. They're really amazing. Come join us. Please join us again in 2 weeks for Kathleen, because she's going to rock the motherfucking house with her books. She's amazing. Kathleen, are you there? Never mind. You're muted.
Yes.
Oh, no,
I'm here. Here I am.
So you get a little taste of Kathleen. Say something, Kathleen.
Hi, I'm thrilled to be part of the Big Texas Read in 2 weeks, and I'm especially thrilled that David is going to be conducting the first session of questions. You know, starting crime fiction was a big change for me from historical fiction, but I really loved writing this series. And The Dime and The Burn are the first two books in the Detective Betty series. So I'm really looking forward to getting in the soup with you, David.
Yay! I can't wait.
It'll be great. Yeah.
Detective Betty is a rock star.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, we're going to have a great time. So everyone, please buy the dime and the burn, and yeah, show up 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah, get your questions ready. That's how we draw the winners at the end. And so for this, just to point out that our seminar prize winners, we'll be emailing everybody, is Catherine Curran, who I think had to go. She had to put her kids to bed, so I'll email her. And then Dina Weaver. I'm not sure if she's on, but I will email her. Or maybe Dina's there. Yeah, okay.
There's Laura in the bottom corner.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so she's, I'll email her. And then Laura Brumley won our 25-page consultation with Mr. David Samuel Levinson. So I will email Laura to connect her to you, David. So thank you for submitting questions and being part of the Big Texas Read. And thank you, David.
Bring your friends. Bring your friends. We'd love to see you bring another person with you next time. If you want, you don't have to, clearly. And if you're really, sorry, Blake, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
It's hard to do this whole, I hate the whole Zoom thing where you keep talking over people, but I guess this is the only way to do it. Unless you guys want to meet in person, just kidding. I hope everyone's staying safe out there in pandemic land. And you'll vote your conscience come November, but we'll talk about that later. Or we won't talk about it at all.
Mute.
Yeah. Seriously. Yes, the dime is great, Robin. I'm glad you started it. It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, great first discussion. What a great book to begin with, David.
Thanks.
So rich. It was just great. So I think we're just really happy about this first book and the way it went, and we now know how it ended. We think.
Yeah.
And then just looking forward to our, talking with Kathleen about her book as well, The Dime. So this has been really great. So
yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I'm excited to hear what David has up his sleeve as a moderator. And then we'll have a guest moderator for The Burn, which is another great Dallas writer, Heather Harper Ellett, will be conducting that one with Kathleen for The Burn. So stick around, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Kathleen, can you hang out for, do you have time to hang out for 2 seconds?
Sure, absolutely.
Great, I need to ask you a second. Okay, thanks everybody.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks so much. Happy reading, and stay safe.
2 weeks. Yeah, stay safe.
Definitely stay safe. Wow, everyone's really just jumping off. How is Laura going to get in touch? You're just going to you'll email her?
Yeah, I'll email her and copy you, and then
okay.
You guys can take it from there.
Thanks for hosting. That's all.
Connor. Thanks, Connor.
I'm glad to see you, Connor. You shaved, sort of.
I did, yes.
You look so much younger.
Aw.